Hi, I'm Parker Dahl,
And I'm Warren Eichhoff,
and welcome to So What?
a place where we ask the question that so many of our students are thinking about when it comes to historical events. So what?
Why do I need to think about the future? I just want to live in the moment.
Well, the following are but some of the answers to those questions, and as always, you should make up your opinion based on the facts.
Today we will talk to you about the most important natural resource.
Water. You thought I was going to say something like oil or plutonium. Nope, just regular old H2O.
And that's what I call high quality H2O.
We left off last time talking about globalization, its path throughout history, and its impact on the modern day world. Eichhoff, what do you mean water is the most important natural resource? I have an endless supply of it that comes right out of the tap.
Turns out people can live without most natural resources. They don't need oil to survive, and plutonium can severely shorten a person's lifespan. Water, on the other hand, is crucial for humans to live.
Okay, sure, I need to drink water, but it's not a scarce resource, so what are you trying to get at?
Believe it or not, it's a scarce resource outside of Seattle. Fresh drinking water is something that people flock to all over the world. With 7 billion people and rising, that drinking water is having trouble replenishing itself.
Not to mention the impact that climate change is having on freshwater supplies. So dependent are people on water that economists, scientists, and historians all agree that the likely next major conflict is going to be fought over water.
Don't believe us? Turns out conflicts have already erupted as a result of water scarcity. In 1967, the Six-Day War was fought for Israel to occupy territories it felt were crucial to its national security. Why were these lands crucial for its national security? Well, the Jordan River.
Israel depends on the Jordan River. When Syria started building canals that would divert water away from the Jordan River, it saw its very survival was at risk. So it decided to bomb the construction sites and set its eyes on occupying the land that was being canaled. Controlling the water supply was in the national interest.
There's a lot of debate about the legitimacy of this action and how it has played out in the current two-state plan between Israel and Palestine. That said, there are many nations that are connected with one another through connected waterways.
It makes sense when you think about it. Rivers and lakes have historically marked the borders between countries. At least 10 rivers flow through half a dozen borders. One country's actions could have dramatic impacts on the others that are downstream. So what?
Are you a hoarder? I said no hoarders. Mr. Dahl, don't you ever listen to me?
I'm not a hoarder. I have a polo on. I'm a businessman. And I'm in the business of selling fresh mountain spring water, delivered to you in a convenient plastic bottle that you can take with you wherever you want to go. Who cares if countries are fighting over water? If they really do need water, send them to me, and I'm sure we can come to some sort of an arrangement. Let's go and ask someone about the impact of water scarcity. Let's go to the World Health Organization. Hello, random World Health Organization individual. Can you please tell me why people should pay attention to the potential problem of water scarcity?
I'll handle this one. I'm going to assume that this question is coming from a country not experiencing water scarcity. Because anyone who has would know that having to choose between watering crops and hoping for food or drinking the water is an impossible choice. They would know the foul smell of contaminated water, the choice to drink it and risk death or not to drink it and risk death. They would know the desperation that people have for their children to see tomorrow, and that this desperation will lead people to any action, including war.
Point taken. I should appreciate the life that I have.
I'd also like to take this one. What is appreciation going to do for this issue? Water scarcity is a problem that is going to grow. How about instead of appreciating your life, you use it to improve things?
Understood. Passive inaction is not enough. Thank you for the wake-up call. As you can see, this is already an issue that is impacting people. So, how widespread is this issue? In 2017, at least 2 billion people get their daily water from a source that's contaminated by feces.
Contaminated drinking water can transmit diseases such as diarrhea, cholera, dysentery, typhoid, polio, and parasites like Giardia here in the Northwest. Contaminated drinking water is estimated to cause 485,000 diarrheal deaths each year.
This is not a contained issue. By the year 2025, it's estimated that about half the world's population is supposed to live in water-stressed areas. This means that fresh water is going to become harder and harder to get.
Part of the problem is the rise of urbanization. As more people move to cities, this places increased pressure on water reservoirs that can't provide an endless amount of fresh drinking water.
Another really big part of all this is climate change. As the earth gets warmer, the air is going to hold more moisture. This is going to mean that we're going to have less frequent rain, but we're going to have heavier rainfalls when it does rain, followed by varied amounts of dry climate.
This doesn't seem like a big deal. Fresh water's still falling. It's raining right now. But the soil can only handle so much water at a time. Too much water can actually kill crops, then of course cause floods and even mudslides.
While those certainly are concerns, the much bigger one is nitrogen. Farmers use nitrogen all the time. It's a form of fertilizer that will help their crops grow not only large, but will get more yields per acre. When heavy rainfall falls down onto the soil can't take all that water in, and so it starts to wash right through it. That water is going to take that nutrients out of the soil with it, mainly that nitrogen. That nitrogen is then going to follow that water as it's carried out down to wherever it ends up, likely a lake, the ocean, or a river.
Nitrogen deposits in water lead to algae blooms. These blooms are toxic. People can't be around them. In 2017, Florida declared a state of emergency and closed its beaches around the Gulf of Mexico due to algae blooms.
These algae blooms aren't just bad for beach day. The algae is actually going to take up a lot of the oxygen that's in the water, thus killing the fish that would have been in those areas. Ocean ecosystems are already having a really tough time with overfishing. This is only going to make that problem a lot worse.
These algae blooms can also find their way into drinking water, making it toxic. A disease outbreak can prompt officials to consider closing public facilities or regulating people's travels. Similar to the case of terrorism response, climate change hazards may require localities to wrestle with how much to restrict residents' freedom to protect their long-term security.
This issue doesn't have an end in sight. Farmers really do depend on nitrogen in order to grow so many crops for the amount of people that exist in the world. So, if the nitrogen gets washed out of the soil, they're going to put some more back in, at least until the next rain comes and we repeat the cycle over again.
Climate change has other concerns. With the rise in severe storms, water reserves can become contaminated in the aftermath of a natural disaster.
Rising temperatures are causing glaciers to recede faster and faster, causing fresh water to be spilled into the ocean, which causes sea levels to rise. This doesn't just impact people's homes, it actually impacts their water supply, because as the sea rises, it will actually seep into the groundwater supply, making it salty. And you shouldn't drink salty water, by the way.
There is a process for purifying salt water called desalination. It is seen as a last resort because it takes a lot of energy to produce very little fresh water.
Countries have started using wastewater to water their crops, and while this does have potential, it also comes with great risk. Because if that water is actually contaminated, those contaminants will just be spread onto the water and then ingested by people when they decide to eat those crops.
Other countries are trying to deal with the problem they are facing now. Australia, for example, has seen rising temperatures and less rainfall over the last 15 years. The impact of this was made relevant this year with the worst wildfires Australia has ever seen.
So bad is the drought in Australia that governments are actually having to decide who gets water. There's an idea of simply allowing for the highest bidder to purchase as much water as they can and then sell the rest to somebody else. There are many who fear, though, that this is only going to work for a few cash crops that use a lot of water, like almonds and cotton, which ultimately aren't really needed by people to survive, but do use a lot of water.
With the rise in the popularity of bottled water, one might simply assume that this is an obvious solution. Let people buy bottled water to deal with this problem. First, bottled water is actually quite expensive. The scarcer water becomes, the more expensive it will become. And this might put it out of reach for many people.
Not to mention that bottled water also has its problems. For the first part, it's not necessarily free of contaminants. In developed nations, the water we get out of our taps is far more regulated than any bottled water that you can buy. And while there have been some instances, like Flint, Michigan, developed nations typically have cleaner water flowing out of their taps than that is sitting in the bottle.
Aquafina and Dasani are actually derived from municipal water supplies, like tap water. Another brand claiming to be spring water, with a label of lakes and mountains, actually came from a well in a factory parking lot near a hazardous waste dump.
In fact, bottled water may be causing more problems. Accusations were cast at Coca-Cola in the early 2000s, when farms in India suddenly ran out of water. These farms were all located around a local Coca-Cola plant that produced goods for the whole world, including one of their products, Dasani water. Coca-Cola denied that it was any part of the drought, even though it was taking over 1 million liters a day of water from the local underground aquifer that used to supply plentiful water to these farms.
This is obviously a problem that is impacting countries, companies, and people. It is also a problem that is going to get worse. So what can we do?
First, be more mindful of your personal water use. Don't use more than you need. Don't leave the tap on.
Second, don't sit back and wait for the problem to arrive in your country. There are multiple efforts to combat this issue, from the UN declaring to combat water scarcity to the Peace Paris Conference combating climate change.
3, climate change is happening. And while there are certainly discussions about how much humans can actually do, to what extent their actions can actually mean, these often delay the reality. Action now has the greatest chance of succeeding.
4, as always, do your own research. It's a complex issue. Be an informed citizen. Don't simply listen to the talking heads like us. Use reputable sources to fact check what you hear and come to your own conclusions.
For with all of these issues, past, present, and future, there has always been hope that an informed citizenry can make a better future. And that starts with you.
And thank you for an amazing year.